Okay, so on Saturday, President Trump signed 4 executive orders with the purpose of coronavirus relief. So basically, the Republicans and the Democrats in Congress were not coming together. They weren't getting any closer. Didn't look like a deal was going to be made. So Trump stepped in, signed 4 executive orders, and said, okay, I'm the hero. I fixed everything, and this is about all we're going to need from here on out. Except it's all nonsense. It's all smoke and mirrors. In fact, it's worse than smoke and mirrors. This whole thing is a con job. Okay, so let's dig into why it's a con job. So GOP senator, right? Not Democrat, GOP senator Ben Sasse referred to this as unconstitutional slop. And that's pretty much what it is, right? He gets to put a nice name on each executive order and say, see what I brought you, except it's not what you think it is, right? If you look into the details, this stuff is worse than it's worse than nothing at all, right? Right? It's all, but he gets to say it because the name on there. It's like the other day when he passed the executive order saying that we get to keep pre-existing conditions, and then telling us all that he's protecting our pre-existing conditions, except our pre-existing conditions have been protected since Obama protected them for us, right? But now Trump's saying he did it. It's the same thing here. He's putting out 4 executive orders that are no good. So let's take a look. So the biggest one that I think is the most dangerous is the payroll tax deferment. So he's come out and said, okay, we're gonna defer the payroll taxes, which is going to put more money in your pocket right now, which is true. But many Americans are going to think that that means that they get to keep that money. It's not. Trump does not have the power of taxes. And, he doesn't get to decide that, right? It's often said that Congress has the power of the purse strings, as it is described in the Constitution. So Trump can't do that. Even within an executive order, right, there are limits to what executive orders can do. And executive orders basically cannot create or destroy taxes, and they can't create new budgets, stuff like that. So when it comes to money, Congress owns the money, right? And how it gets spent. So what we see here is a situation where Trump is saying, okay, we're going to defer those taxes, but when you go to do your taxes at the beginning of next year, you still owe them. So they weren't taken out of your paycheck. In fact, that's not exactly true. They might not be taken out of your paycheck, which means you would have it, but then you'll probably spend it. If you're in a bad situation, you'll spend that money. So then what's going to happen when you go do your taxes at the beginning of next year and you now owe thousands of dollars on the 7.5% that you didn't pay on each paycheck? You now have to pay that at the beginning of next year. Where's that money going to come from, right? How's that going to work? So this has not been described, right? Except Trump is basically trying to extort us here, because what he has said is, if I get reelected in November, I will make those tax cuts permanent, which he doesn't even have the ability to do, right? He would have to have it go through Congress. So you'd have to have a Republican House, Republican Congress, and a Republican president in order to make sure that happens. And it's not even clear that the Republicans would support this. The Republicans have spoken out as really thinking this is maybe not such a good idea. So it's just talk. Hey, I'm going to put more money in your pocket. Yeah, but then you're going to take it all back in January or February when I do my taxes. So that's not helpful. And here's the key, okay? The 7.5% payroll tax that Trump is temporarily deferring is what pays for Social Security and Medicare. Social Security and Medicare are already underfunded. In the early to mid 2030s, there's going to be changes to Social Security if we don't make some changes now. They're going to have to start restructuring the way that Social Security is done. So that's already a concern. Now we're going to go about half a year potentially not paying that, right? If the Republicans do manage to make it permanent, that's going to underfund Social Security even more, which means the cuts that get made in the 2030s will have to be even deeper. And that's going to be a problem for people who have been paying Social Security. Then they get to retirement age and all of a sudden they're going, what? I'm getting 50 to 75% what I thought I was supposed to be getting. I can't live on this. So, it's all nice to say that we get to pay less in the moment, but if it's going to cost us, an arm and a leg later on down the road, maybe this is not the right approach, which is why No one, Democrats or Republicans, were really in favor of the payroll tax, but Trump's been talking about it for months now. Let's do a payroll tax cut. Let's do a payroll tax cut. And even the Republicans aren't getting on board with the payroll tax cut. So while it may make him feel good to stand up and say, okay, everyone, I'm putting money in there for you and you're all taken care of, if you actually understand what's going on this money, you go, whoa, this is not the right way to do it. This is not the right way to handle this. That's problem number one. Then we get to the unemployment benefit. So here's the issue with the unemployment benefit. So Republicans wanted to give people $200. The Democrats wanted to give people $600. Looks like Trump split the difference and said, let's make it $400. Okay, well, all right. You could argue that maybe that's an okay thing to do, except there's problems with that because, again, Trump doesn't have the power to create money and create budgets. So he has to get that money from somewhere. Now, there's a little bit of money left over from the previous stimulus that hasn't been spent yet. So he can grab some of that. The rest of the money is coming from the EPA. So he's taking the money and making an argument that that should be spent on unemployment in the short term, which may be okay, right? That might be an okay way to go about doing things. One of the problems is we are expected to have a very severe hurricane year. So when these hurricanes start hitting places and all of a sudden we have entire major cities that are homeless because, they're flooding in their cities, there's not going to be a whole lot of money there to take care of those people. So we have to keep an eye on that and make sure that when our cities are being blasted with hurricanes this year, that we actually can go in and help those people. Right? Those people are going to need some kind of help. We got to make sure that there's funds there for them. Now, back to this $400, whatever you want to call it, bonus on the unemployment. Trump is requiring that states kick in 25% of that. So the federal government would put in $300, but the states have to agree to put in another $100 to get it to $400. Plus, the states have to run the whole thing. Right? It's up to the states to manage everything. Right? The Trump administration does not like managing things. We've seen that from the very beginning. They like to make decrees and make rules, but when it comes to actually managing things like the coronavirus, they're like, we're kind of hands off here. We'll just kind of see how things play out. But the real problem with that is that the states have already been saying for months, look, we need money. We need money to get through this. So coming to the states and saying, in order to get this extra money, you have to pitch in more of your own money is going to be pretty difficult for states that were already saying, we need you to give us more aid. We need you to give us more support. Now, they can use money from the previous programs that they've gotten through coronavirus stimuluses earlier, in the earlier packages, if there's any of that money left. If you didn't already use it to help people, especially if you're in states, New York, California, Texas, Florida, that are seeing bad situations, then you may have spent most of that money, meaning those states are going to have a hard time paying their end of the unemployment insurance. They're already ramping up the legal challenges to this, so we're going to see where this is go. Unfortunately, legal challenges take time, so it's totally unclear what's going to happen here, right? We're sort of seeing someone do an end run around Congress, which is not the way we'd like to see our government operating. It would be nice if our government could actually work for the people, but as we've seen in the last few years, that isn't going to happen. Going into this, just be aware, right? Look into the situation and make sure that you're dealing with this in a way that you can handle later on, right? Because if it turns out that that tax deferment is going to have to be paid at the beginning of next year, which in all likelihood it will be, even if Trump gets reelected, you're probably still going to have to pay those taxes. You don't want that as a big surprise when you go to do your taxes at the beginning of next year. So what's being recommended is that money gets put to the side and you just kind of sit on it unless it's an absolute emergency, which unfortunately it is for many people. And then you're going to find yourself on the short end next year. In fact, it's not even clear that you will even see an increase in your paycheck because companies don't want to do the same thing, right? So the way the payroll tax works is you pay a share and your company pays a share, right? Well, if the companies don't pay that share now because it's being deferred, but then they have to pay it in the beginning of next year, which like we've seen, in all likelihood, that's what's going to happen. They all of a sudden have to either come up with a massive amount of money to pay all that, or guess what? Take a huge chunk out of your January check. Okay, that's not going to work for anybody. That's not going to work for the companies. That's not going to work for the people. So it's being suggested that many companies are just going to keep it going like that never happened. So Trump got to tell everyone that he's giving them some money, and yet you're not even going to see an increase in your paycheck. So it's all just smoke and mirrors. It's all just show, right? This is really a big con job to get himself some credit when nothing's really even changing. So it's basically just a big dumpster fire. I mean, if anything was ever a dumpster fire, it's this. So, not a whole lot of good actually coming out. There's a few small details, right? Smaller things like student loans being deferred under certain conditions. That's good. Student loan deferring those kind of payments until later on. Good. But the big things, the one that's getting everyone's attention, it's basically just all a big con. So look out for that. Make sure you're informed with how you're dealing with your finances in respect to these executive orders, so that you don't end up in a bad spot later on, right? Don't let his lies burn you next spring when you're doing your taxes, okay? So thanks for checking out the video. Head on over to Twitch, Political Perspective over on Twitch. Having a good time over there. I'd love to see more of my viewers over there. Really good way to interact with people and have a good time and talk about some news in a real-time back and forth format. Having a lot of fun with it. So head on over, check me out, Political Perspective on Twitch. Otherwise, I will see you later.